What law doesn't exist yet in the US that would help millions of people immediately? The American rule is that everyone pays for their own attorney fees unless you signed a contract that says otherwise, or your state established a right to attorney fees for some limited claims. This is different from many other countries, where the loser in litigation pays for the winner's attorney fees. The US system makes it more likely that someone sues over questionable claims if they have the money, and can incentivize someone to file lawsuits just to get a favorable settlement. The winner-pays-all system makes it less likely that people file questionable claims, and maybe we want plaintiffs to bring claims even if they aren't sure they'll win, but also makes it easier for people with fewer resources to file good claims. It's a subtle rule, but changing it would totally shift the analysis on when to file a claim. The main difference between the system is that in the US, frivolous lawsuits are a sport. Everywhere else, they're a quick way to buy the opposing lawyer a new watch. Story 2. Adding term limits to Senate and House Representative seats. Adding a law to prevent stock trading by members of Congress. Adding a law that if the government is shut down due to lack of an appropriations bill, an election will be held within 90 days for each seat. Adding a law that the people will vote on congressional pay and benefits. If you see a trend here, it is intentional. Story 3. A law giving banks the ability to cancel subscription charges in the event that the consumer can't do so with a merchant. As it stands, it's not possible. If a merchant goes out of business, has no account option, or customer service is a downright scam, nothing can be done short of closing the whole account. Not even reporting fraud and changing your card number will help. In this economy, who can afford to be paying for crap they don't need? Story 4. Any cop who cannot supply body cam footage upon request, or during an arrest, or whenever, is immediately stripped of their rank and has to go back to police academy for a minimum of 1 year. If this happens 3 times, they're fired and blacklisted from police and security work. If the missing footage is of an incident where the officer terminates someone, the officer is fired and blacklisted from police and security work. Story 5. Forget everything else. The coolest, most game-changing law that doesn't exist yet is a Universal Basic Income, or UBI. This isn't about a small credit or temporary handout. This is the Economic Freedom Act. It drops a regular, no-strings-attached cash infusion into every single adult's bank account. It's economic jet fuel for the bottom 90%. Rent stress drops immediately. People can finally pay for that overdue car repair immediately. It treats poverty like an engineering problem and solves it with direct cash flow, immediately giving millions of people the breathing room to build a stable life. It's the ultimate financial floor. Story 6. Public financing for all elections. It 100% removes private funding in the ability to purchase politicians. Everyone who runs for office gets the exact same amount of money to run, and there's no outside funding. Suddenly, everyone can run for office, and it is no longer an index of wealth or ability to raise wealth. You instantly get a drastic different class of human beings running for office. It disempowers the lobbies and re-empowers the public. Story 7. Term limits. Every office in America gets 2 terms or 8 years in office, whichever is greater. Simple, easy, and no exceptions. The Founding Fathers could never have imagined someone would want to make a career out of politics. Their intent was for our representatives to be citizens to go and serve the government for a short period of time and then return to their own lives. The only way this country will survive is for us to normalize the average everyday citizen running for office getting elected and serving a short period of time, and then returning to their own life and being a productive member of society. Story 8. I honestly believe that if you have a restraining order against someone and that person chooses to go to your house regardless, that should be considered a threat and you should be allowed to use force against them. You should not have to wait until they break in. If they are on your home property, you should be allowed to use force, even if they aren't doing anything yet, even if their back is turned. Because, let's be real, they are not coming there for any good reason. I think this would solve the issue of the people who violate restraining orders over and over and over, while the victim has no real ability to fight back. Story 9. The Law of Equal Apportionment. This would override the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929 in order to address the unequal power held by rural areas, which enables the current minority rule of the Republicans, RS. A vote by a California resident should count as much as that of a Wyoming resident in the House of Electoral College. Let the POTUS be elected by popular vote. No constitutional changes required. Simple math. Story 10. A maximum limit on short-term rentals per population. Corporations, especially overseas ones, snatching up all the housing and turning them into Airbnb rentals and ending our housing market. CEOs or boards of corporations should have a cap on salary bonuses relative to the valuation of the company. Tax breaks for the rich had a purpose: to provide more money to flow down through their businesses and improve quality of life for employees. But it's being exploited where their greed causes them to hold all the profits for themselves. Story 11. All schools are funded from a single pool of money from the state. You're not allowed to have rich schools and poor schools. Also, all schools will have a literacy gate where if a student can't read, they get help back, or tutors, or special help until they can. Our democracy is dependent on an educated electorate, which is why public schools exist in the first place. The systemic sabotage of our education system needs to be aggressively addressed. Story 12. I will name a few. Hold elections when the government shuts down. Boom. No more shutdowns. Senators can't trade stocks. Term limits. Age limit on the elected officials of the current average lifespan minus 10 years. Eliminate corporate bribery, lobbying, PACs, etc. New amendment to the Constitution requiring certain airwaves controlled by the US government. Gonna get complicated because the FCC is independent, but figure it out. To cover candidates running for various elections for free. Political ads, whether they be a candidate ad, attack ad, or issue ad, are outlawed. Campaigning is still legal, but fundraising is not allowed, nor is campaigning in a place not everyone would have access to, within reasonable limits, fire codes, etc., meaning no selling tickets for a venue. It's 2025 and kids are still sitting at the school lunch table without a lunch because they can't pay. Also, for some reason, I am not allowed to pay off the bill for kids who were given lunch but unable to pay. Just stop it already. Paid maternity leave is the law. It blows my mind that this is still not a thing. Fix the broken healthcare system. It's time the government stop trying to pretend the insurance companies aren't the problem and sidestep their industry completely. They can dry their tears with their trillions of dollars. The fun thing about my list is every single item on this list is not controversial at the Thanksgiving table, but is impossible due to politicians. Story 13. All businesses must do profit sharing. Half of all profits must be spread to their employees. Employees get 1 share per month worked. Maybe managers get 2, but 90% of the shares must go to frontline workers in the business. Other fun laws that would make things better? Businesses above $100 million in assets must do their best to stay in business. No purposefully shredding the company to make money off the bankruptcy. Any individual wealth over $100 million is taxed away to fund social programs. Maybe even a universal basic income, or just spread around with tax rebates. Of course, this could initially hurt, but if businesses are their own entities with a fiduciary duty to care for the company and the employees, then they could start looking more like employee-owned businesses. We'll let businesses buy back shares, quite frankly. They should be constantly selling shares to raise funds for expansions. Then companies should buy back shares when able in order to maximize the amount they pay in dividends. Story 14. Put restrictions on AI. Force it to always show watermark or it gets taken down. Or straight up ban it. It's making problems differentiating between fallacies and reality. Sometimes literal, sometimes psychological. Students are using it as a freaking life support. And frankly, so are the teachers. Artists aren't allowed to post mistakes unless they want to be accused of using AI, etc., etc. We need something to restrict it, or freaking get rid of it. Also want to add, this is about generative AI and chatbots. Not really concerned about AI in video games or anything like that. Story 15. Charging students money for lunch should be made illegal. There are a lot of stories praising students for selling their toys or candy or other things like that to raise money to help other students get out of lunch debt, but that shouldn't even be a thing. Prisoners don't pay for their food, but school kids do? Yes, I know education budgets are ridiculously low and they need to make money somehow, but that's a separate issue entirely. I've moved a few times as a kid, so I've been to a few different schools, and not one of them had food that was worth $2.50 a day. Eggs that bounce over your head when you drop them, burnt pizza, a block of macaroni and cheese. McDonald's had better food, and back then it was cheaper too. The dollar menu still existed. Story 16. Tax-funded universal health care. I live in Canada and am receiving timely treatment for advanced cancer. It doesn't cost me anything out of pocket. I don't have to beg people for money to stay alive. My benefits from my employer are enough that I can still pay my mortgage while I receive treatment. My job will still be there for me when I'm better because there are labor laws that protect employees. My Canadian bank has lowered my monthly mortgage amount to interest only because the person I spoke with had compassion. I will recover from my illness and keep my home without going into more debt. I gladly pay my share of higher taxes for a system that benefits us all collectively. Even if I'd never needed it, there is a sense of security to know those systems are there. Empathy keeps us human. Story 17. Something about holding media companies accountable for running fabricated stories, inserting unreasonable bias, or preparing unfair, one-sided gotcha questions. Also applying these same rules to Congress, and when witnesses, individuals, or politicians are called up, having some rule in place that prevents them from dodging the question and giving nothing-burger answers, as well as preventing those questioning them from making up absurd this or that questions where it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. Story 18. Congress, the Supreme Court, as well as the President and Vice President's salaries are not to exceed that of the average median wage of the population. If Congress and other government officials want to pay raises, they can pass and implement policies that increase average wages of the population accordingly before they can do so. Also, corporations are no longer allowed to donate money to politicians or their campaigns. Campaign finance laws need to be tightened, and politicians running may be allowed to receive only publicly funded or individual donations. We also need to amend the First Amendment to include clear text that blatant lies and misinformation are not protected speech. When that misinformation or lie causes material harm, there needs to be legal repercussions. Just a few thoughts. Story 19. All fines a business gets are on top of revenue made from illegal activity. Fines stop being the cost of doing business and start actually being punitive. Remove the legal grounds for shareholder supremacy. If a company cannot receive the punishment for a crime, such as termination, responsible executives are guilty of the crime in both civil and tort. Story 20. Specific requirements for news outlets portray everything in a factual manner, how these things have to be worded and how much of the facts have to be stated and in what manner. American news is complete garbage. It's entertainment via party politics. If it's not an outright lie, it's a partial truth, intentionally worded to make people mad. They want ratings and ad revenue. Now, people vote based on dumb things like thinking Zorhan is going to put Sharia law, and not at least about tax policies and how he's going to fund things. And news outlets are incentivized to do that because more viewers means more ad revenue. They need a law or incentive, or they won't do it. Story 21. Any law or set of laws that completely eliminate private funding or electoral politics. Once private interests can no longer pay for political privilege, most other problems will sort themselves out. And since this so often causes confusion around here, when I say no private funding, I mean absolutely none. A political candidate cannot accept private donations, nor can they use their own money. There's always someone that reads something like this, then complains about taxes. I promise that the end result would be a lower tax burden in the long run. If we as taxpayers want to own the system, then we as taxpayers need to be willing to pay for it. Story 22. A law that would make it illegal for companies to make you pay a subscription fee for an inherent function of an item you purchased, like forcing you to pay a monthly subscription to use the heated seats that came pre-installed in your vehicle, or having to pay a fee in order to actually use your printer to print things. You shouldn't have to pay to use things you bought. Story 23. Ranked choice voting. Cube root means of allocating and expanding the U.S. House to better represent the population. Overturned Citizens United. Overturned Dodge Brothers versus Ford. Right to repair. Ban baseline budgeting from congressional appropriations. Restricting growth of programs to inflation only would balance the budget in about a decade. Term limits. Ban gerrymandering. Health insurance must return to nonprofit status. Repeal the Federal Reserve Act. Return to limiting a company to a maximum of 1 AM, 1 FM, and 1 TV station in a market. A massive increase in the enforcement of antitrust laws. I'm sure I missed a few. Story 24. German Constitution. Article 1. Human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority, often used in debates about social security. Article 14. Its use shall also serve the public good. Article 20a. Mindful also of its responsibility toward future generations, the state shall protect the natural foundations of life and animals by legislation and in accordance with the law and justice by executive and judicial action, all within the framework of the constitutional order. Article 104. Liberty of the person may be restricted only pursuant to a formal law and only in compliance with the procedures prescribed therein. Persons in custody may not be subjected to mental or physical mistreatment. Story 25. Government shutdown should be illegal. Congress has regular opportunities to negotiate and vote on budgets. A continuing resolution shouldn't be used as leverage after a policy dispute has already been decided. Using CR funding that way is the legislative equivalent of hostage-taking and human shields. Government functions do not belong to politicians. They belong to us. Funding should continue automatically at existing levels when a budget isn't passed. CRs should not include unrelated provisions. Legislators should not receive pay during a lapse in funding, and they should not get retroactive pay afterward. Politicians should be completely prohibited from directly managing or trading stocks. All assets should be placed in true blind trusts for the duration of their service. If a politician is found to have passed inside information to a broker, agent, or family member, both parties should face mandatory prison sentences, should receive a financial reward, and full legal protection. Story 26. Banning all private funding for politicians, both during campaign, in office, and for 20 years after they leave office. No lavish campaign donations, no promises to hire them after their term for a high-paying job after they leave office. The fine for breaking this law should be 2 to 3 times what they were promised at minimum, as well as immediate dismissal from their office. An immediate asset seizure for even offering private money to a politician. Every candidate gets the same campaign budget and can only earn their office's salary. Story 27. Term limits for all politicians. Literally everyone seems to agree about this on both sides, yet it can't even compare to a vote because they are so in control they don't bother with actual concerns of the people. They just pretend to care so they make more money into oblivion. I hate the both sides of the same stuff as much as anyone else, but the mummies of them really are. And it's absurd that we can let these politicians get richer and richer for decades off of a public dime. The presidential term limit should be applied across the board. Story 28. Political reform. All elected officials will be in office during business hours, 40 hours a week. They will never miss a congressional session, and everyone will vote on every single bill. They will be paid the average annual income for a family that resides in their district. They will have no other revenue streams while in office and cannot make any new investments that exceed half their annual salary. They will be subject to the same healthcare and retirement programs as the people in their district. Story 29. The federal government, as the administrator of Medicare, is legally barred from directly negotiating medicine prices for the entire Part D program. Instead, price negotiations are left to the private insurance companies that administer the Part D plans. I'm from Ireland. Every year or few years, the Irish government says to various large pharma device health companies, right lads, who wants to supply 100% of Irish public health artificial hips, asthma, meds, etc., and at what price? The rest of the world treats Big Pharma the way Costco or Walmart treats suppliers. We squeeze them on price, force them to compete with each other to lower prices for the benefit of taxpayers. The US has laws forbidding this, and reform has been blocked by Dem or GOP lawmakers for years. Next time someone makes the argument that the government is inefficient or the public option is too expensive, ask why Medicare is legally prevented from negotiating prices, or why the post office is required to fully fund 100% of their pensions. Story 30. Other people have said it, but we really need a law that facilitates votes of no confidence for congresspeople, senators, and executive leaders like they have in most nations that have parliamentary systems. The people shouldn't be stuck with ineffective leadership just because they got elected to serve a set term. Our elected representatives should have the constant risk of being fired at any time for not serving the interests of their constituents weighing over their head every day they do the job. They should know that if they can't do their job, they immediately get replaced with another round of elections at any time. Story 31. Medicare becomes Medicare for all, funded through a payroll deduction that only starts with employees making $200,000 a year and goes up. And the more you make, the more you pay in. And anyone who isn't a W-2 employee but makes $200,000 or more, they pay a small tax, small in proportion to their income. That progressively increases as the income is increased. And there is an AMT for this purpose to avoid any loopholes. So Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are paying millions upon millions into this. Story 32. I have 3. If one of these passes, it would have huge benefits. No phones in school. Lockbox for each student at the door. You have to put your phone in to enter the school, then it's locked till the last bell. No advertising on sports for any betting. No ESPN segments sponsored by whatever company. No steep-ass picks. No odds certain player gets a hit. Nothing. No more Congress stock trading. You and all your immediate family members are barred from trading for your entire term of office, plus 1 year after. Also, you are subject to an independent financial investigation upon leaving the office to make sure you took no illegal funds. And since you're not in office anymore, you surrender your campaign funds as a donation to your favorite charity. Story 33. The US is supposed to be a free country. The government should not be punishing any citizen for any action that does not harm any other citizen. Someone's butthurt is not harmful. No civil or criminal case should be allowed or brought to court unless there is an actual identified victim who was harmed physically or economically, or put at serious risk of harm. And hired government thugs, the police, who go out and create conflict are not victims. Crime has to have an actual victim outside of law enforcement. Story 34. Immigrants can become citizens by default if they spend X amount of time in the country. This would also apply retroactively to anyone who can prove they've been in the country for that long as well. It's stupid that we don't treat people who fled their terrible country better. Not that ours is any better. Most immigrants are not stealing your jobs because they're taking the jobs you wouldn't want to do anyway. It's kind of ridiculous how expensive it is for them to become a citizen, and not only that, but they also have to pass tests that most of our own natural-born citizens couldn't pass. Plus, it makes zero sense why the government wouldn't want to keep them anyway. If they become citizens, then that's more taxes they get to collect from them. Maybe our government isn't quite as corrupt as I thought. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 35. A cap on how much more a CEO or other executives of large corporations can earn versus their employees. Like the CEO at Walmart makes near 1,000 times more their average employee. I think it's criminal that the gap can be that large. Yes, CEOs and top executives would be allowed to earn the most, but there should be a law that it can't be over a certain percentage more than what they pay their average employee. I don't know what that percentage should be, not much of a numbers person, but there should be a limit of sorts. When the people who do the labor that keeps your pockets overflowing and you pay them less than a living wage and there's no one there to stop you from doing it, I think a law is needed. Story 36. A law is only ever as good as its ability to be enforced, so priority should go to better screening for law enforcement officers. I heard that some departments will actually disqualify you if you score too high on an intelligence test. That obviously needs to be repealed. Only 6 weeks at the academy as opposed to the extensive months-long training the military receives. Clearly, police need more training on de-escalation tactics and the difference between orders to follow and orders to disobey. And better yet, emergency on-call social workers and mediators to settle non-criminal interpersonal issues. Story 37. Unemployment should be a shall-issue scheme. Companies already pay unemployment tax into a state-controlled account that's distributed to former workers. The companies don't get that money back for any reason, even if they fire someone with cause. So they shouldn't be any more involved than here's how long they worked for us and here's their payroll for the last year. A company shouldn't be able to stop your government benefits just because you annoyed them. Story 38. Compensation limits tied to the lowest paid worker at the company. For example, the highest paid person, C-suite, and the like included, can't have a compensation package larger than, say, 20 times their lowest paid worker. This includes total compensation, so this includes benefits. It should cap out with the salary being assumed to work more than 40 to 50 hours. To make it easy to compare to hourly employees, it should also scale part-time employees, as in the math should work if they were full-time. Would help eliminate the income inequality and help cut money out of politics because the only way you're getting more of this is if you bring others up with you. Story 39. Free and fair elections. Trump and Musk manipulated the 2024 election, and if we don't stop it, he will never leave, and there will never be fair elections again. For those who want to call me a blue election denier, consider Vlad and see. 2026 will be fraudulent again, securing the GOP, or Republicans, the House and Senate. Then Trump will start writing his own laws about how long POTUS can remain in power. Is the slightest possibility of this becoming reality worth an ounce of your skepticism? Can you consider that just maybe it was possible for them to cheat? Maybe we should look into it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Story 40. Price control. People say the government shouldn't pick winners and losers, and yet they already do, in a more obscure way, involving red tape for subsidies and grants. So price controls on so many things: rice, bread, milk, etc. Things that are a necessity. You want fancy bread? Great, that doesn't have price control. But white and rich bread? Price control. Wholemeal? Price control. 2% milk? Price control. Don't want price control on 1% or whole? Fine. Price control on insurance prices. Price control on anything medicine related that is preventative and non-cosmetic. Price control on housing. And also removing ownership of homes. Gas, people will say. Yeah, it's needed. Because people own homes, and because people are a POS, they demand that the price of their house continues to go up forever. Because people decided a house was a valid settlement. So now we purposefully control how many and where houses can be built, all to make sure the prices go up. So we do away with home ownership. You get 99 years. Which means you can resell your house and still potentially make money in the first 10 to 40 years. And after that, the value is sure to go down because the new owner has a countdown timer. And it's unlikely that someone in their 30s wants to buy a home that has less than 50 years left. In short, price controls and measures in place to remove the goddamn incentive to make houses investments. That's it. That is all that is needed. You are all welcome. Story 41. As an outside observer from the UK, a few things that we take for granted and that apply in a lot of other European countries that definitely make our lives better, but with the caveat that they come with costs in terms of lower wages, etc. Employment not tied to healthcare, minimum periods of paid time off, need to be consulted and notice given before redundancy, mandatory levels of health and safety which are linked to and updated according to findings of coroners and court cases following accidents. No get out for, say, meat packing plants that can just switch states. All of these things come from costs which get described by business owners as red tape. But they matter. A lot of our workers' rights come from the various labor movements and have their roots in heading off revolution or a switch to communism. Story 42. Americans could easily and very quickly have a net positive on educational outcomes, reduce welfare burden, and ultimately reduce crime and create a better society by providing hot, freshly made, nourishing meals. The cost is pathetically cheap over the career of a child from kindergarten to 12th grade. Below is a list of calculations I did once just to prove it. To calculate the total cost of school lunches for a child from kindergarten until graduation based on the assumptions provided, we will follow these steps. Determine the number of school years and the split in pricing. A full U.S. school career from kindergarten through 12th grade is 13 years. The cost of lunch is $3 for the first 6 years. The price then rises to $4 after grade 6. This means grades kindergarten 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, which are 7 academic years, will have lunches costing $3 each. Grades 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, which are 6 academic years, will have lunches costing $4 each. Determine the number of school lunches per year. A common U.S. school year has 180 school days. The child eats lunch every day of the school week, so this amounts to 180 lunches per year. Calculate the cost of the first period, kindergarten to 6th grade. Number of years, 7 years. Lunches per year, 180. Cost per lunch, $3. Cost for this period, 7 years times 180 lunches a year times $3 lunch. Cost for this period, 1,260 lunches times $3 per lunch equals $3,780. Calculate the cost for the second period, 7th grade to 12th grade. Number of years, 6 years. Lunches per year, 180. Cost per lunch, $4. Cost for this period, 6 years times 180 lunches per year times $4 per lunch. Cost for this period, 1,080 lunches times $4 per lunch equals $4,320. Calculate the total cost. Total cost, cost for the first period plus cost for the second period. Total cost, $3,780 plus $4,320. Total cost, $8,100. Therefore, based on the assumptions provided, the total amount spent on school lunches from kindergarten until graduation would be $8,100. Story 43. I propose 2 laws. First, companies cannot be combined. No purchases, no mergers, no partnerships. They can't be combined to form monopolies. Mergers never benefit the public or often even the shareholders. They exist solely as a way to limit competition in the marketplace. Second, all software must ship with full source code. The code is still copyrighted and can't be resold or copied from, but the license has the absolute right to see all source code in any software they license. That would go so far in preventing this grift economy of spyware we have today. Businesses would declare it's the end of times and fight both to the death, but life would be so much better if they existed. Story 44. Here are a few obvious ones. All full-time jobs must offer 28 days paid time off per year, minimum. Part-time jobs would scale accordingly. All full-time jobs must offer 3 months fully paid maternity and paternity leave minimum. After the 3 months are paid, people are entitled to up to 9 months unpaid, during which their job is secure. Companies are required to keep track of how much paid leaves employees take, and any companies where average usage is under 75% should be fined. This is to discourage managers never approving leave. This would likely benefit at least 100 million Americans directly, and more indirectly, and would have negligible upfront cost to the government. Story 45. There's quite a few. Some examples. Universal health care. A new budget law to prevent stalemates like the current one from shutting down the government. Further protection for professional civil servants from politically motivated hiring and firing. But also accountability to ensure that those civil servants are doing their jobs well and without corruption. The IRS being prioritized first so it can run better, collect more taxes, audit more wealthy people, and finally get rid of the need for most people to file at all, as many other countries have. Story 46. Promising Pathway Act. For dangerous diseases, it would create a time-limited conditional approval pathway for new treatments. This would cut about 75% of the time and money needed to get a medicine approved. It requires all people using these medicines to be followed in a learning system, so it vastly increases the amount of research at a greatly reduced cost. Insurance would have to pay for these treatments. Net result, we would get access to many new treatments quickly and have the infrastructure in place to figure out the best combinations quickly. It should result in much cheaper medicine and, best of all, should easily double the survival rate for some of the worst diseases almost immediately and provide a realistic path to the actual cure decades sooner than the current system. Story 47. CEOs and execs can't make more than 500% of what their lowest paid employee makes. So if the lowest paid employee makes $30,000 a year, the CEO can't make more than $180,000 a year. If they paid everyone $100,000 minimum, they could make up to $600,000 a year. If we wanted to be more conservative, we could start with 1,000%. Annual raises legally enforced dependent on inflation, so employees could never make less than the year they did prior. Also make it illegal for landlords to raise rent more than 3 to 5% annually. And that includes if the unit turns over and it is relisted. Story 48. Foreigners who live in foreign countries are only permitted to own residential property in America if they are currently undergoing the legal process to move to America, or purchasing on behalf of a relative who is going to be living at that address. If any other people register their driver's licenses at that address, they may only do so as a significant other or relative of the current occupant, or the property will be seized and sold at auction immediately. Also, any properties owned by foreigners who do not intend to set foot on U.S. soil will be seized and sold at auction after 6 months without occupation and/or maintenance and/or reappraisal with a property inspector. Businesses are not permitted to own empty residential addresses for more than 6 months also, and on any empty or occupied addresses must have regular maintenance and/or reappraisal with a property inspector. Many areas of the USA have falsely inflated housing costs because it is owned by Saudi royals as investments. It's why there's so many empty, unowned houses that are more than $4,000. Story 49. Caps. Caps on everything will solve most problems. A cap spent on lobbyists will stop giant corporations from outlobbying the majority. A cap on the amount one could spend to run for any government office at all levels, including donations. This would make it accessible to all and not just for the rich ones or the ones that are supported by giant lobbyists. A cap on term limits will stop those just there for power a lot better than what we have now, etc. One could argue that this could cause potential problems, but it's clear the current system put into place to prevent corruption will just result in delayed corruption that is almost impossible to root out once it takes hold. Story 50. Not really a law, but public community service should be a more often used punishment in courts. Why should someone possessing substances ever be locked up? I don't doubt so many people out there would be able to expand themselves if given an opportunity to interact with things beyond their comfort zones. Could even tie in with helping boost employment if those going through such things could apply to whatever field they'd helped out in during their time. As a secondary, I wonder what would happen if fights or duels were permitted with the requirement of both parties being in agreement to the contest. Whether it's a fight, a race, what have you. People have disagreements. Some people get physical. Stopping these things from happening altogether isn't feasible as it just lets tension rise up. If fights like this did have rules to them, it would even encourage general safety measures taking place, like accessible boxing gear or whatnot. If both parties agree to participate, it'll be fine so long as it doesn't end up as manslaughter. Third, tax companies whose upper echelons make more than a certain percentage of average wages of those below them. It will never make sense why CEO parasites, especially the Nepo babies, stand to make a fortune while those keeping the actions of the company afloat are just barely kept alive. Either pay your staff more or have the excess skimmed off the top to pay for stuff to help build the communities they're living in. At the very least, if it's tied to profits, then maybe companies would consider reinvesting into their workers to improve quality of life and safety measures. Even if wages don't necessarily go up, it'd be great if dock workers in the winter weren't freezing to death. For restaurant workers to ever have to worry about not having sufficiently heated water. For business venues to be able to perform renovations that avoid deterioration. All better than some parasite pocketing everything to buy another yacht or plane. Story 51. No longer tying healthcare to employment. Why should medical coverage be considered a form of wages? We are expected to earn our medical coverage? Universal health care for all. It seems antithetical to the principle that all Americans are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can one live if they lack health care support? It's also ridiculous that our government will use tax dollars to fund incarceration, but not fund a system that will promote the well-being of its citizens. What kind of future do you expect to see when the basic needs of our citizens go unfulfilled? Story 52. Universal healthcare, federal minimum wage, tied to inflation, universal paid parental leave, reasonable gun regulation, and a buyback program. We need regulation of media to mitigate harmful propaganda and disinformation. The fairness doctrine was deeply flawed, but at least it was something. Our courts have so liberally interpreted the civil right of free speech in the First Amendment that it has been weaponized against us in the current media ecosystem. We need reasonable limits and oversight. There are many other countries that have a better balance currently. The same can be said of gun regulations. Those profiteering from the unregulated markets have a stranglehold on our legislature and our judiciary, unfortunately. And there's been an aggressive rollback of voting rights. Perhaps if we implemented compulsory automatic voter registration, universal vote by mail, and reversed the Citizens United ruling that allows corporate bribery of politicians. Term limits for Congress. Story 53. Government shutdown should result in a 5% per day reduced annual pay for all government officials who have a say in if it shuts down. After maxing at 100%, 20 days, none of them would ever be eligible for re-election. Also for Congress, no one is eligible for re-election unless the government is in surplus. As long as the national debt grows, no one in Congress should be able to be re-elected. Crap would get straightened out real quick. Lastly, family homes should not be able to be purchased by companies and investors. More taxes on your primary residence, almost nothing. And then ramp taxes so fast that owning more than 2 to 3 homes doesn't make financial sense. Home dwelling should not be an investment market. Story 54. Okay, this one might be controversial. Pass an amendment. A national sales tax will be levied on all items and services not required for survival. This tax will be equal to the national debt divided by GDP times 10%. This would have two effects, both positive. We would raise funds on luxury goods and services to help pay down the national debt. Politicians of any party would be truly incentivized to balance the budget and maybe even reduce the overall debt. It would become insanely popular. It would become almost political suicide to try and pass spending that wasn't accounted for in revenue. Story 55. Laws that I'd like. For positions of governor or higher, you cannot have, start, own, or be party to a business due to potential conflicts of interest. Alternative option. If we can't do that, then you simply cannot negotiate new deals for said business while holding office. Cannot alter your investment portfolio unless it's to withdraw while holding office due to potential conflicts of interest. You can hold a paid political position. However, if the government is to shut down, you cannot be paid until the government is operational again. You got time to lean, you got time to clean, do your job. Congress cannot vote for their own salary increases. Gubernatorial and presidential candidates must have a master's or doctorate in at least one field, such as engineering, law, finance, economics, medicine, sociology, science, political science, history, etc. Being a grad of Toastmasters doesn't cut it. It should be illegal to slander or libel the opposing party. The government is at least bipartisan. Complaining about the other party or accusing things of being their fault is just complaining. Complaining doesn't produce solutions. It hinders them. It should be illegal to tout, cite, discuss, or even wear jewelry representing religion in government departments, press, and programs such as DOE. It's not required that Christians wear crosses, which is far different from Sikhs wearing head coverings. Our government should respect all religions, but should never promote or insist upon religious practice of any kind. Saying things are done as in the Bible or pressing for Bible teachings or 10 Commandments in public school, with zero room for other religious beliefs, is highly illegal and should remain so. Our nation was founded with freedom of religion in mind, not to be based on one. There should not be restrictions for things such as military, first responder, etc. positions if you can prove physically and mentally you can do the job, regardless if you were once a different gender or sleep with someone of the same gender. Just as it's none of our business if the VP is sleeping with a department friend's widow, it's no one's business who you go home to at night so long as the work gets done. Call me crazy, I just think these things are kind of obvious, and if they do exist, should be enforced. Also, as an addendum, if it's witnessed that the president of our free nation is not doing the best of his ability to lead, help, or fix the nation, yeah, remove him and his cabinet. Like if he's sleeping on the job, vacationing, and partying an excessive amount, etc. But if he's deliberately trying to oppress his citizens, then he should be held for treason. Things like enforcing that the military turn around and draw on citizens, suing to make sure food programs don't get funded so people can starve. Just as an example, it'd be crazy if someone actually did that. Story 56. There are a couple big, obvious ones. Single-payer healthcare, especially if the law removes existing medical debt, would be huge. Same with publicly paid higher education that removes student loan debt. Both of those would revitalize a generation, plus build up the next generations. But a less popular answer that would also heavily benefit nearly all Americans would be a comprehensive data privacy law. We have nothing on a national level, and with the rise of AI and the continuation of the monetization of data around advertising, plus the rise of cybersecurity incidents across the country, real data privacy laws with real teeth, jailing owners, management, and board members of places that don't comply, would have immediate and positive impacts on many, many people in the US. Story 57. Unlock normal SNAP funding immediately. Fund community or technical college job training to move tens of millions of low-income Americans to mid to upper five-figure professional careers, lifting them out of poverty. Block corporations from buying single-family homes. Create single-payer healthcare like every other first-world country, and disintegrate for-profit insurance companies. A small number of them will be allowed to continue existing for-profit, docs in a box, stat healthcare clinics for sniffles, scrapes, and broken limbs to alleviate hospital congestion. Block sitting members of state and federal legislatures from buying stock. Reverse Citizens United. Money is not speech. Allowing individuals to give hundreds of millions of dollars to a campaign is ridiculous. Put an age limit on serving in state and federal legislature or executive office. Story 58. No individual can own more than 2 residential homes. Corporations cannot own residential homes. Homes can be as small as insert tiny house or studio apartment specifications here in most areas. If you can prove you paid a monthly rent amount that is greater than or equal to your monthly mortgage payment for a specified period of time, that counts toward mortgage approval more than a traditional credit score. Story 59. We could do this with legislation, no amendments needed, though that would be sweet and stable. Lawmakers, federal, state, and local legislators may not have any other source of income during their term in office. All investments before election before they are seated go in a blind trust until 8 years after they leave office, and another is sworn in and seated. That means stocks, bonds, partnerships, overseas account, real estate, where you don't sleep over half the time, cash under the mattress, everything. I'm okay with paying skilled legislators well for doing a good job, good enough to keep a home in Washington, D.C. and one in their district. Not mansions, just good homes. Make it equivalent to the medium single-family home in the U.S. I am not okay paying legislators to make themselves and their cronies richer. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.